Hi, I'm Alex, and today I want to talk about why the internet is the worst thing ever. But before I talk about the internet, I want to talk about my cell phone. This is what it looks like. It's called a Cat B100. It has a few excellent features. The first one is text messages. I can send text messages. Second one is phone calls. I can make phone calls. Third one is an FM radio. The fourth one is that I can do that and it doesn't break. And the fifth one is that it runs 0 apps. There's no Facebook app for the Cat B100. There's no Twitter app. There's no Instagram. Most importantly, there's no email. There's no Snake, although the next phone I get is going to have Snake. It was a trade-off between Snake and dropping your phone on the ground. I can also do it in a glass of water, so I figured that party trick is better. But the reason that I ended up with a dumb phone was that my notification tray was ruining my life. That it was an endless barrage of buzzes and notifications that were dragging me away from what I was doing. The average person checks their phone 150 times per day. And what I saw is that I would go to a meeting, I would go hang out with my friends, and it would look a lot like this. We'd all pull out our phones and just start checking them and not talk to each other. So I want to do a quick experiment right now, and I hope you'll bear with me. You really want to pull out your phone right now, don't you? You're just sitting there like, this is boring as shit. I want to take my phone out. Because what we're doing is we're constantly running a competition in our heads of, is what I'm doing more interesting than checking my phone? That every second I walk down the street, I'm like, well, this conversation's boring. I'll just pull out my phone. We're always looking for something better, something more interesting, and not focusing on what we're actually doing. Our heads are pulled in a million directions. And it's not just on our phones. Let's be real. When we're at work, we've got like 6 monitors, and like 2 of them are for actual work, but one of them makes it easy that when you want to check Twitter, you can check Twitter. And so we're building a world where we're constantly getting distracted. We're dropping what we're doing to check what everyone else is doing, to look at Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Slack or email or any of these freaking apps. But does that actually make us more productive? In fact, it turns out it makes us less productive. There's this brilliant professor at the University of Michigan named Sophie Leroy. And she doesn't look like that, and this GIF is disturbing, so I'm going to move on. But what Sophie has studied is what she calls attention residue. Every time you move from one task to the next, the layers build up in our head. We don't just drop what we were thinking about when we go to the next thing. We're still keeping some of that context, some of those ideas in our head. And so when we go check Facebook for 10 seconds, it's not really 10 seconds. It's, oh, I'm just going to tab out to Facebook. Oh, that's a baby picture. That baby's cute. And then you go back. But you're still thinking about that baby while you're working on whatever you were working on. And so we're constantly filling our brains with more information. But it's not our fault. Because it turns out that these app makers are studying ways to ruin our lives. There's a lab at Stanford, right down the hall from the lab that's curing cancer, called the Stanford Persuasion Tech Lab. And you know what they study at the Stanford Persuasion Tech Lab? They study ways to build habits into apps. So how can you make that app more addictive? How can you hook someone with your app? And you know where the graduates of that lab go? They don't go to work at NASA. They go to work at Facebook. They go to work at Instagram. The founder of Instagram is a graduate of that lab. And we're creating a world where that's what they need to do. In fact, it's not the people at the lab's fault either. It's these guys' fault. This is Kevin Ryan and Dwight Merriman. They're billionaires. They started DoubleClick, which is one of the most successful ad companies. They got bought by Google, yada, yada. But what they created was a way to make money on the internet that wasn't charging people for something. Instead of charging me to use a website, suddenly websites can charge advertisers for my attention. Facebook knows that for every second I spend on Facebook, they'll get paid some dollar value. They know how much that time is worth. So you know what they do? They try to make it so I spend as much fucking time as Facebook as humanly possible. It's no wonder that we're being scammed, that we're being tricked. Our attention is gone. We're the victims of 30 years of brainwashing that just whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down so that we just want to pull out our phones right now. That this talk, not that interesting. You could just pull out your phone and it might be better. There's someone who could make money selling your attention. We're fucked. But that's not it. The first thing you look at in the morning probably looks something like this, although this person has a lot of spam in their inbox. We've created a world where our inboxes are our to-do lists, that we let other people add anything they want to our to-do list at any time. And it turns out that if the people, that anyone who wants to can add things to their to-do list. It's not ours to-do list to control. It's anyone who wants to put something in my inbox now can be at the top of the list. And if the people in your inbox are anything like the people in my inbox, they're greedy. They want their answer right this second. So they fabricate emergencies. They say, I need this in the next 10 minutes or else it's all over. Give me it right now. They need it right this second. And you know what? It feels really good to answer those emergencies. It feels really good to bang them out, to say, you know what? Oh, what did I just do? Just clicker problems. All right. That's why you practice. It feels really good to deal with those emergencies. You get a dopamine hit every time you check a box. But it's actually dangerous. Because going back to that creepy GIF and to the idea of attention residue, we're brainwashed. Every time we check one of those emails, every time we answer a quick Slack request, we're actually adding a layer of gook in our head. We're making it harder to go and focus on the next thing. We're not just pleasing our coworker, we're actually ruining our lives. And so, but our inboxes don't look like a Gmail inbox anymore. Our inboxes look like Slack. And Slack is amazing. It makes the trains run on time. The teams that use Slack are more productive. They go to less meetings. I believe all of this. I think that that's true. But you know what else is true? If you use Slack like email, you're setting yourself up for a dumpster fire. Your host, if you use it like a to-do list, your day is over. And you know why? With email, you only saw your inbox. You got to see what other people had put on your to-do list. But Slack and IRC and HipChat and Campfire and Microsoft Teams move our individual inbox into a group chat. We're seeing a group. We're seeing everyone's communications. And if you try to hit inbox 0, you might succeed. If you try to hit Slack 0, I'm sorry, buddy, but you're host. It's done. Because you have to read that guy's email, and you have to read her email, and you have to read his email, and you have to read her email. And now you got a full-time job reading other people's notifications. And does that make you more productive? Does that make you better at your job? Is that helpful? No. And Slack isn't email. If you copy and paste an email into a Slack message, it feels more urgent. It's instant message. It's instant. You want a response right now. And when we get a Slack message, are we dropping everything every time and just switching what we're doing to answer that message? Is that healthy? Is that good? Does that make us more productive? What we've done is we turned our inboxes into to-do lists, and then we changed the paradigm of our to-do lists into Slack or into chat, and now we've got even more notifications all the time. And we live in a prioritization crisis where we don't set the schedule, our inboxes set our schedule, our Slack notifications set our schedule, and we're not doing the things that we actually need to do. We're doing the things that feel really productive. So my question for you is, were you hired to answer emails really quickly? Were you hired to check Facebook every once in a while and then get back to answering emails or banging something out, and then at the end of the day cramming to hit those big goals? Or the things that you're most proud of, were they shipping important work? Were they getting real things done? And at the end of the day, your best work requires you to take a step back, to think, to figure out what matters, and then to execute. And not to execute where you're working on this important task and then you're switching over to something else and you're multitasking, but to sit and to focus and to do the work. And it's uncomfortable, it feels awkward. You want to check your phone, but it doesn't help. So my challenge to you is, what would happen if you unplugged for 30 minutes? If you turned on airplane mode, if you turned the internet off on your computer, you went into a conference room, you put on some sick jams, and you worked. You know what? Nothing bad would happen. I promise. Your inbox will still be there at the end of the day. It's not going anywhere. It's not running away. And it turns out that that makes us feel uncomfortable. Judging by the faces of the people here, hearing the idea of what if I unplugged for 30 minutes feels really anxious. Or you're coming up with excuses. Well, I could never do that. My boss wants a response in 30 minutes. If I don't get a response, I'm going to get fired. If my company, that would never fly. We need to be connected all the time. We work in a real-time, fast-moving environment. You're making excuses. Well, let me tell you about these guys. Well, they're not actually these guys, but they definitely look like this. I don't know if you've ever met anyone who works at the Boston Consulting Group, but they usually look like a stock photo. And so BCG is a management consulting firm, and I don't know if you've ever met a management consultant, but they're pretty much the definition of always on and fast moving. Management consultants are the first to wake up in the morning and the last to go to sleep, and they're answering email and working the whole time. There's a professor at Harvard named Lisa Perlow who somehow convinced a small group within BCG to do an experiment and see if they could unplug for 1 day a week. They would rotate which member of the team took some time off. And you know what she found? That team was more productive and the clients were happier because they unplugged. That's amazing. That it turns out that in a world where no one is focused, being a little bit more focused is a competitive advantage. It's actually really helpful. You're going to get ahead by disconnecting. You'll get ahead by being more focused. Your organization will be more successful. In 2017, being slower at answering email is a competitive advantage. Now, I'm not saying you need to become a monk. That is unrealistic. You don't need to buy a dumb phone. You don't need to install a crazy internet blocker app. You don't need to go and live on an island. But you can't just wake up and say, well, I'm going to be more intentional tomorrow. I'm going to focus better tomorrow. I heard what Alex said, and I maybe agreed with him a little bit, but probably not that much. I'm going to focus tomorrow. It's going to be good. That doesn't work because our willpower has been beat out of us. Bit by bit by bit, we've got a device in our pocket that sucks all of our willpower away. It's gone. We can't just decide to be more productive. What we need to do is to create routines and patterns that force us to be more productive, that force us to have a little bit of self-control. Because there's none, it's gone. How can we create blinders that make it so that we're a little bit more focused? How do you create routines that make us more successful? And now I've got a story. I don't know if you've ever met a vegan, but they'll remind you that they're a vegan. They're going to tell you within 10 seconds, hey, I'm a vegan. And you know why? It's not because they're an asshole. I used to be a vegan, I'll tell you the truth. It's not because they're an asshole. It's because being a vegan is really fucking hard. And so the only way to stay a vegan is to tell everyone you meet that you're a vegan, because that way, if you go run out and eat some like cheese or eat some meat, that person's going to catch you and you're going to be busted and you're going to look like a jerk. So my question is, how do we create that I'm a vegan moment for focus? How do you create those routines and those patterns that help you focus and prioritize and be more productive? I don't know the answer. I'm like the least productive person in this room. But here are 4 strategies that could be helpful. The first one is to limit notifications. In 2017, when you get a text message, your pocket buzzes, and then if you've got one of these newfangled watches, which I don't, your wrist buzzes, and then if you have a piece of jewelry, that could buzz, and maybe you've got a brain implant that's shaking your brain, and then your computer's got a little thing, and you really know that someone wants to get in touch with you. You really know when someone's trying to talk to you. Well, what if you were able to turn it down just a little bit? What if you were able to figure out how to moderate those notifications? Could you quit your Slack app for an hour a day? Would that be the end of the world? Could you log out of your inbox from 4 to 5 p.m.? Could you go all the way, right? Could you, what is the thing that works for your life that's a way to tone down those notifications, to decrease the number of inputs that you've got going on? The second thing is to prioritize. As we discussed, our inboxes have ruined prioritization. How do we control our own priorities without letting other people control them for us? This is Mark Andreessen. His head looks a lot like an egg, but I think that that's really his superpower because he invented the web browser and about 6 or 7 really important things. He's a genius. And you know what he does every night before he goes to bed? He writes down the 3 most important things he wants to get done the next day. He writes them on a postcard with a pencil every night. And as he goes through the day, he's crossing off those 3 to-do list items. And so what that means is that he's decided what the important things are. He's never writing on that to-do list, you know what, I really wish that I was faster at answering emails from strangers on the internet. I really wish I checked Twitter more. No, he's writing down the big ideas, the big things he wants to work on. And maybe a postcard isn't for you. Maybe you're more of an 8.5 by 11 guy. Maybe you've got a text file in a fancy system, and that's your to-do list. But is there a way to create a to-do list that doesn't live in your inbox? A way to own your own priorities. Now, number 3 is to block off time. Bill Gates, when he was the CEO of Microsoft, used to take think weeks, where he would spend a week in the woods living in a cabin with no connection to the outside world, just thinking and writing about what the future was. Well, I'm not the CEO of Microsoft, and I don't see Satya Nadella in the room. So I think that we're good on cabins in the woods. But I wonder, is there something you could do that would block off some time for you to focus on the work that matters? Could you create a fake calendar event that just lives in your calendar, and when someone goes to schedule a meeting, they see it and they're like, hey, he looks super busy. Well, little do they know you've got a decoy going on that lets you get real work done instead of meeting with their sorry ass. How do you block off that time? Maybe you wake up 20 minutes earlier and sit down and do some work. What are the things that work for you? Number 4 is my favorite. How do we add friction back? This lab at Stanford that I talked about earlier that's all about hooking people on apps talks a lot about friction. How do you remove the friction? How do you make it as easy as possible to send a tweet? How do you make it as easy as possible to use Facebook? How do you make it as easy as possible to check your Gmail? What if you make it as hard as fucking humanly possible to check Twitter? I have a friend who every time he logs into Twitter, clicks the forgot password button and then sets his password to something he's never going to remember. So that means that when he wants to check Twitter, he has to go to Twitter, click the forgot password button, go to his email, maybe do a 2-factor auth depending on what day of the month it is, because he's not a scrub, he's using 2-factor auth. And then he's got to find his reset password link. He clicks that reset password link, he resets his password, and then he can see those sweet tweets. Well, you know what? He checks Twitter a lot less than you do, because it takes him a while. And by the time he gets to the inbox and he's clicking that button, he's like, you know what? That was a lot of friction. Maybe I don't want to check Twitter. Maybe I'm going to go back to what I was doing. And maybe that's too much for you, but is there something in the middle where you can increase the friction, can make it harder for yourself to get distracted, creating a world that makes it easier for you to do what you actually want to do? So, rewinding, the 4 strategies: limiting notifications, prioritizing, blocking off time, and adding friction to your life. This is a great way to become a superpowered human being who's a machine, who just focuses all the time and gets shit done. But we don't live in a vacuum. We all have someone who we answer to. We all fit within organizations. So my question is your organization the type of organization that rewards this kind of deep work, this kind of focused, important doing? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If you're a manager, how can you make better for your employees? So I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I have no clue. But here are 4 questions you can ask yourself for a survey on, is your place the type of place that gets real work done? My first question is about hygiene, and not that kind of hygiene. What I'm saying is, how's your Slack hygiene? How's your email hygiene? Do you work for the type of company that sends an email at 5 p.m. and expects a response at 5:05? Or do you work for the type of company that if someone's working really hard on something and then gets back to your email, that's okay? How do your notifications work? Does someone at channel in Slack all the fucking time and bother everyone in the company? Because that's no fun for anyone, and that's not going to help you focus. Someone in the back, and I'm not going to look at them, just laughed because that's what their organization is exactly like. So what is your hygiene like? Are you creating the type of communication infrastructure that makes people productive? Does your organization have the type of schedule that's filled with useless meetings? Or do you work in the type of place where meetings are sacred? Many of the people I know who work at these hip, newfangled internet companies have maker days where there's no meetings at all. At Amazon, if you want to schedule a meeting, you have to write a 6-page memo first that explains what you're going to talk about in the meeting. Because they understand that every time you go to a meeting, you're taking someone away from important work. You're preventing them from focusing. Is your company the type of company that'll let someone unplug and focus, or do they need to be always on? If I go into a conference room, is someone going to barge into that conference room and say, hey, you look like you're doing important work. I'm going to bother you right now with my trivial question? Is that where you work? Can you make it less like that? Can you be a rogue soldier that helps move your organization forward? And now we get to my favorite example. The best Seinfeld episode of all time is the episode where George, and of course it's George, discovers that in his day-to-day job at the Yankees, if he just walks around looking really angry, people will think that he's productive and he'll get a raise. His boss thinks that he's the hardest person at the company because he just walks around like he's working super hard. Turns out that he gets nothing done, he gets fired, and they replace him with an intern on Tuesdays. My question is, if you walk around looking busy and answer emails really fast, is that what your organization rewards? Or do they reward focused shipping of stuff? Do they reward people getting things done and doing the important work? So I've got 60 seconds left. I'll leave you with a quick summary. The first piece is that these fucking app guys are brainwashing us and we're not able to focus anymore. It's all gone. The second thing is that we've given our prioritization, we've given our to-do list over to strangers on the internet, and anyone who wants to can add things to our to-do list. And so I propose a solution. The solution is airplane mode. And now, bear with me, what would happen if tomorrow, from 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m., you put your phone on airplane mode? And you just focused. You did the things you wanted to do. I don't think anything bad would happen. What's the worst that could happen? Try it. I don't know. Let's see. That's all I got. Thank you.